Hello, my beautiful mythical old souls, and a huge warm welcome back. What if the universe is speaking to us all of the time in signs, symbols, and what we might dismiss as coincidence? In this week's show, I'm joined once again by the wonderful Mike Bais. We are back for really a part two on last week's episode, where we spoke about fate and destiny, providing all important context for this episode about synchronicity. And you'll see why it's all important context soon. Mike is a physiotherapist, university lecturer, counselor, author, and a trained priest in the esoteric Christian tradition. Together, we explore the profound mystery of synchronicity, how meaningful coincidences shape our spiritual journeys and reveal hidden connections between the seen and unseen realms. Drawing from Jungian psychology, Kabbalistic teachings, and mythopoetic wisdom, we uncover how synchronicity isn't just random chance, but an intricate dialogue between our inner and outer worlds. Jung described synchronicity as an acausal connection between events that hold personal meaning, bridging the gap between the material and metaphysical realms. We talk about how we can cultivate awareness of these signs, interpret them in service of our spiritual path, and discern their deeper meaning without falling into superstition or over interpretation. Join us on this journey into the heart of synchronicity, where myth meets reality and where the unseen forces of life conspire to lead us towards wholeness. And before we jump into all of that goodness, I will soon be opening the doors to my brand new crucible for women called Beauty Potion. And it's a mythical quest for eternal beauty guided by Psyche. You can discover more and register your interest so you'll be one of the first to know as soon as it opens at bemythical.com/beauty. And if you are struggling with the challenges of walking your soul path in this crazy modern world, come join us at our Academy of the Soul, Unio, where you can get guidance, support, and kinship as you walk this most ancient and time-honored of paths. You can find out more and join us by hopping on over to bemythical.com/unio. And now back to this week's episode. Let's dive in. Hello, Mike. Welcome back to the show for the fourth time, I believe. Is it the fourth time? I think it is.
Guess so. Yeah, I didn't count it, but very happy to be here again.
And
do another episode.
Yes. Well, we kind of ended up leaving on a bit of a teaser last time. So we recently recorded an episode kind of like setting the scene for this one, which was what we were going to talk about. So we talked a lot about fate and destiny, which felt important context, and then felt actually synchronicity really deserves its own episode, not least because it's one of my favorite things. And so that's what now we are going to be diving into. But first, just to tease it out a bit longer, we felt it'd be helpful to do a little bit of a recap in terms of that context of fate, destiny, also talk a little bit more about purpose and providence, which we only touched on last time, before we finally dive into the magical world of synchronicity. So would you begin with giving us a little bit of that tour around the landscape, please?
Of course. Yeah, let's try to give a bit of a amalgam of all the things that we talked about last week, I think it was. From a Kabbalistic perspective, we have different views on fate. Of course, it's spelled F-A-T-E, that kind of fate. And you have personal fate, which is also sometimes being called unconscious fate or general fate, which is mainly located, so to speak, around our personal life, which is on Tree of Life diagram, is around the yesod of our psyche. So that's the ordinary human processing of the psyche in a sense of thoughts and feelings and memories, and from memories also anticipation on what is coming.
Hmm.
So the personal life with all its conditionings and instincts and impulses.
Before you go on, I just realised that I don't think this came to mind last time we spoke, which is quite surprising
Yeah.
now in this moment. But it calls to mind that very well-known Jung quote, probably one of my most quoted quotes: "Until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives, and we will call it fate." And I
Yeah.
think that's, clearly a very true quote. But I think it's helpful in this instance to recognize that we often do relate to that word fate, the notion of fate, as something that just happens to us. We're like a victim to
Mm,
fate. It will just
mm,
happen. And we've
yeah.
got no conscious understanding of why it's happening, let alone any
Mm,
say in that. And so I think that
yeah.
that quote sums up our relationship to this notion of fate and what's meant by it quite well,
Mm,
actually.
yeah. Exactly. And so the first part of fate, or the first description, has to do with where things, excuse me, where things are still not conscious, and people
Mm.
do not know direction in life per se, at least no conscious direction of where one is going. But nevertheless, there is a pattern, there is a direction, but it's been given, so to speak, to
Mm.
us. And that's why it's called unconscious or general fate. We move with the masses, we move with the group or with the tribe, with the family, with all the customs and those kind of patterns and conditionings. Nothing wrong with that in itself, but well, if you talk about spiritual work, at least we have to know what is going on there to come to any sense of individual purpose and fate and where that is going. And maybe it is, in a sense, in conformity with the general fate, but often there are also ingredients that ask us to go in a different direction. So, individual fate or specific
Is
fate
that
is
ever
more
not
direct.
the case? I would say
Yeah,
there's almost
that's
always,
true.
hence it is often
Yeah,
uncomfortable and comes with some fear, and it certainly
mm,
calls of us something different.
yeah, yes,
Mm.
yeah. Well, and for some people, I think we addressed that in the other episode. For some people, this is really like a crisis.
Mm.
A lot of
Yes.
people in their youth, in their puberty, they go through it anyway, but then it slowly, you know, dies off, and it may return later. But yeah, it is something that comes from an inner impulse to individualize. Some people have a very strong or rigid structure, um, be well within their family or their church or whatever it is, and therefore it's difficult to individualize and to yeah, to outgrow this unconscious and general fate. So anyway, so we have the general fate, we have the specific fate, which is more centered around Tiferet, so that's the heart center, so that's the individual. Or you just quoted something from Jung, so that's the process of individuation. And there the questions arise from self-consciousness. Well, where do I need to go? Where's my essence? Where's my authenticity? Often the language of myth, fairy tale, and the like, they may give clues to um, where the deeper layers of our authentic life is actually is being held.
Mm.
So
And it can be the time where we actually, and I think we touched on this last time, we kind of reclaim that interest and love in stories often. It kind of seems as though there's
mm,
an aspect of us that recognizes how myths can guide us. And
yeah,
so those of us that felt like we'd grown out of fairy tales when we were
mm,
younger have this sense of like suddenly they're speaking to me in this other way, and I
mm,
noticed that over and over again, wakens within us or reawakens within us.
yes.
Mm.
Oh, definitely. And that's the playfulness with kids, what you see when they see these kind of things, or they read about it, and they identify with certain archetypes, like the hero or the maiden, the wizard, whoever it is. And often it highlights, at least for, temporarily, it highlights um, what their essence is. And for some people, it never leaves them. So even though they grow up and they still know that this is the leading archetype or the living story for me behind my own life. And it can be a very powerful concept to use to live your own individual fate. Yeah.
Yeah. So
If you don't use it, sorry, I would just want to say, if you don't use it, or you don't have a story or a myth to live by, then often the myth or the story itself, that's like daily life and society is being given to you, and that's the structure.
yes, absolutely. That's brings to mind a Rumi quote, which, in some ways is much of the work that we do at Be Mythical. It's something like, don't be satisfied with stories of others, unfold your own myth. And that, I think, has sadly become increasingly rare in our culture. Most of us are living stories of others.
Yeah.
But this is the opportunity, as we become conscious of it, that we can begin to live our own myth. So please do continue up the tree.
Yeah, and of course, a famous myth in the Western world, the Round Table. Let's say more or less at the beginning of Camelot, when they all see the Holy Grail at the center of the table, then it vanishes, and one of them, Gawain, says, "Now we should go in pursuit of this miracle. We all should go individually on our quest." So there you have the individual fate. We should go where it is most dark and where the growth within the forest is the most thickest. So there you go. There's no path, there's no structure yet. You have to make it out of the unfolding of your own being. And of course, that asks for a hero motive there. You need to really step up to the plate and be willing to live your own life. Yeah. So it can be a scary thing at the same time. Yeah. So more or less, there is also where providence comes in, where the individual, from whatever concept, maybe Kabbalah or something else, starts to learn and mature psychologically that whatever befalls her or him is something that is always in favor of the quest. So wherever you encounter pleasure or pain, or it's going very well for you and your path is prosperous, or it is with a lot of misery and downfall, nevertheless, providence from a Kabbalistic perspective may mean that everything is constantly trying to bring us back to a state of unity and wholeness. Of course, there are different concepts about providence, but this is one of them. So the highest world within Kabbalah, Atzilut, the world of wholeness, constantly pours itself out throughout creation and asks to return to the same state of Atzilut. And for most of us, that is our grail. We all want to become whole and to heal and to... but there's the challenge at the same time.
Yes.
Is how to interpret the bad times in an equal way.
Is this a good segue to now move into synchronicity, or do you feel that there's a little bit more scene setting to do first?
No, I think it's perfect time. Definitely. We can always maybe go back and talk a bit about the terms we just addressed. And then,
yeah. Wonderful. I can't wait any longer to talk about synchronicity.
Yeah, that's good.
Which is quite apt, actually, that it was a Jung quote that came to mind this time, because it's, of course, a word that was coined by Jung. But, of course, it is something that I would say is recognized in many traditions. But certainly Jung was the one responsible for naming it and illuminating it in a way that's
Mm.
brought it to a kind of much more of a mainstream consciousness. And I notice, and this is partly why I really wanted to do this episode, it's become something which I think is largely misunderstood. It's a term that most people know and use,
Yeah.
um, but often don't understand the real depths of it, what's actually happening, what it's
Yeah.
showing us, how we can use synchronicity
Mm.
more powerfully in service of our fate and even destiny. So this is why I feel it's a really helpful conversation to have, because just speaking personally, it's been such a potent force in my own life. There's so
Mm.
many times where the guidance I needed to make, for example, a difficult choice has come
Mm.
in the form of synchronicity. And it's only
Yeah.
understanding its role in the way that I do that's allowed me to make a choice that otherwise perhaps may have seemed quite counterintuitive or actually foolhardy.
Yeah.
So would you talk about synchronicity from a Kabbalah perspective, and again within the context that we've just been laying out?
Mm. Yeah. No, but what you said, yeah, I completely agree in the sense that uh, we probably first have to come to a kind of a consensus about, yeah, what are we talking about with synchronicity, because there's a lot of misunderstanding about it, or at least there are different ways of explaining it.
Mm,
Different. So um, a part of the idea behind synchronicity, where things fall into sync in time, but seem to be unrelated in their causality, or can be for some people completely random.
hmm
So they think, well, I don't know how this happened or why in the first place, but it happened. I don't see um, the again the causal nature of it, but nevertheless things fall together in time. They fall in
mm,
sync. Kabbalah is not so much about coincidence, that things just happen. Everything is related to an unfolding pattern from subtle worlds. That's a divine world, and also a Briatic world, which is a cosmic metaphysical world where everything is structured according to a certain plan. That's also the causal world.
mm,
So that things will may happen coincidentally is not always something that you find within a lot of Kabbalistic literature or text.
mm. Yes, actually, this I think is a really helpful thing. So if I remember rightly, the way that one of the kind of criteria, let's say, for
Mm.
something being
Yeah,
considered synchronicity from Jung's perspective was there's a
yeah,
causality, as in there
yeah.
isn't that obvious cause and effect that we
Mm.
would typically, on a material level, be able to say, oh, that's happened because it's been caused by this. But as you say, from
Yeah.
a deeper metaphysical standpoint, we
Mm.
recognize there is cause, but it's not the way we typically think of cause and effect.
Yes, exactly that. Yeah. I mean, we may, when something happens and we say, oh, this is very synchronistic, we may, with hindsight, it may be a year later or whatever, we may say, ah, but now I see why it happened, or I
Mm.
see maybe the causality behind it. So it doesn't
Hmm.
mean always that there is no causality, but
No, but
yeah.
I would say in the main, even when we do see the cause, it tends to be a more mythical cause, as it were. It very rarely
Hmm.
is a kind of like, oh, I understand now. The thing I missed was, I don't know, something happened on a material level that caused it. Even if that is involved, I think when we do see the cause, it's much more we're seeing the deeper cause as opposed to
Hmm.
it being a mundane cause.
Yes,
Mm,
exactly. Yeah. And the
yeah.
many relationships that come with it. I mean, we may have a tendency, let's say, I'm just saying this in general, but especially in our Western mind, that time is linear. So you have a causality and then you have an effect.
Mm,
But of course, in reality, there are often many causes to many different effects.
mm-hmm,
And those effects also have a lot of, or function as a causality for the next thing.
mm-hmm,
And that's the chain, so to speak, of becoming. One link causes another link, and that link is attached to many different links in many
mm-hmm.
strands. So
Yes. Mm-hmm.
we shouldn't make it too simple. The whole
Mm.
unfolding of cause and effect.
Yes, I think that's really well said, because I think by even the words themselves, cause and effect, it can sound as though there's only, like there is one cause and one effect. So it's kind of a link of two things, when actually it's a
Yeah,
web of all kinds of unfoldings and relationships that's actually at play, whether or not we're
exactly.
conscious of them.
Yes, exactly.
Mm. Yes, I
So, and
think that's
then
helpful.
very, let's say, spiritually, technically, uh, according to Kabbalah, you have different worlds, and therefore you also have different perceptions on time.
Mm.
So synchronicity, in sync with time, from Chronos, the god of time, the ticking time, um, which might be first of all be related to the physical reality that we're living in,
Mm-hmm.
which is the clock time that we keep. Which in a sense seems to be related to our physical notion of time,
Mm-hmm.
because our physical body is in direct relation and has a relationship with the earth and all its creatures. So that's natural time that we have.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, our psychological time functions often also in a different way. A good
Mm.
example is dream time, where you can go from one place to another in a few seconds.
Mm.
Um, so synchronicity has different meaning on different levels. Just wanted
Mm.
to say that as well. And even on the metaphysical level,
Oh, can I just
so
give a
that's
quick, as you said
sure
that about
anything.
dreams, I was like,
Yeah.
this synchronistically links to a dream I had the other day. So um, I'm practicing lucid dreaming and kind of
Mhm.
having sort of degrees of lucidity. And
Yeah.
one that I had last week, I think it was, I wasn't fully lucid, but I had the opportunity to go back in time and redo something differently. So the
Yeah.
dream was wild. So I won't go into the detail of the dream, but I'd done something in a
Mhm.
way that it was dangerous. And then I had this choice in the
Mhm.
dream where I was like, oh, I can rewind this, and literally rewound time and then
Mhm.
did something different the next time. And
Yeah.
it came to mind when you said that. I was like, yes, of course, this is the interesting thing. Not only in dreams can we, as you say, something can unfold really quickly and we can jump from A to
Mhm.
B. Um, the deeper we go into that dream consciousness, the more malleable it becomes, where we can
Yeah.
literally do things that seem impossible from the material level. So I just thought that was a helpful example of, like, yes, more and more we
Yeah.
start to see this time isn't quite happening in the way that we think it is.
Mm. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Mm.
And our system, our natural system, um, at night, but also during the day, is trying to bring into sync the different realities and experiences of time,
Mm.
which is all. It goes by itself in a way, but it's not always an easy task to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's an interesting thing about what you said about lucid dreaming, and if we use the Greek terminology of time, chronos, as a god, as a principle, but you also have kairos time, which is self-conscious time. And in chronos time, every just time unfolds and ticks away, and we are most of the time within the patterns that we have given to time,
Mm.
and the synchronicities that we experience in it. But Kairos time is self-conscious time. It also means that there you can make a choice within the ticking time, and it's there where you do not exclude synchronicity, but you more or less, even if it is for one choice or for a minute, you can master time because you can own the space, as it were, that time contains. And in it, you can make certain decisions. That's sometimes for people called free will or choice.
So you're kind of almost making your own synchronicity.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Making conscious patterns between time related experiences, bringing them together. You could also say, well, it's a way of managing your life spiritually, but your life becomes less coincidental. So it doesn't mean you, of course, you own everything, but at least you can make conscious decisions that make things to relate to each other. And you
Yes.
create a conscious pattern in time.
Beautiful. So another aspect of Jung's illumination of synchronicity was this sense of this thing has some kind of meaning to the person. So that it's not just
Yeah.
something that happens that they've got no interest in. There's something that happens that it has some sort of resonance, this feeling of this means something to me.
Yeah.
So I'd love to spend a bit of time talking about that. What's going on
Yeah.
there from a Kabbalah perspective? Why would that sense of meaning be
Mm,
activated by this event?
very much. Yeah. Um, yeah. Synchronicity, meaning, those two things, they bring back the personal level of the individual together with, we talked about it a little bit, purpose, or the level of the soul where one discovers what really matters for them. So the person is occupied and learned how to do everything according to what is being expected and all responsibilities in life. Of course, important to a certain degree, but meaning really becomes very individual, and there one finds purpose on an individual level. Um, so I think Jung really had something to say about it there, and I would say it's probably very Kabbalistic what he how the way that he described it there. So it lifts us, the meaning lifts us out of the ordinary world, the lower psyche, so to speak, and brings us back to our essence, or some would say, I think Jung as well, authenticity. So it stimulates us to go back to our individual essence.
It's I think we touched on this in that last episode where we were saying that experiencing meaning, even in the hardest of times, creates
Yeah.
an opening, creates something that invites us
Mm.
into a different way of relating to the thing. It doesn't necessarily make the thing
Yes.
easier, but just having that sense of meaning alone creates this transformation or the opportunity for
Yes.
transformation.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the soul in itself cannot do without meaning. So if the world is a, or the universe existence is a meaningless phenomena, the soul would not function at all.
Yes.
So it's like the divine giving meaning to itself by expressing itself through existence. The soul wants to do equally. Therefore, it's enormously sensitive to purpose and to meaning in life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although it may be very personal and individual, but yeah.
And I've noticed over the time, both personally and also with students, that sometimes we have a clear sense of what the meaning is, as in, this links to something in a quite conscious way, that it has this
Mm.
we could articulate what the meaning is. Sometimes it's more of a
Yeah.
felt sense. There is just a felt sense of resonance. Like, this means
Mm.
something to me. The fact this is
Yeah.
showing up in this way now,
Mm.
I can feel it means something. I don't yet
Yeah.
know what, which I think links to
Mm.
the next part that I'd like to get into. But do you notice that we don't necessarily, and I think we get better and better at trusting this as well. We trust that felt sense of this has
Mm.
meaning, even if I
Yeah.
can't intellectually express or identify or express why it has meaning. There is something about
Mm.
that feeling of meaning that starts to become a guide.
Yeah, no, I've seen it all over the place, and also I can testify it of myself. But
Mm,
I think the first thing that pops into mind is working with a round table and with the Grail at the center. Is that some people have an immediate clue of what it is for them, because
mm,
it's always a subjective reference they have to the
mm,
Grail. For some, they say, "Okay, my Grail at this moment in my life is love, or it's
mm,
compassion, or it's justice, or whatever it is." And other people may say, "I know it has a deep meaning, but what it is, I have not yet a clue."
mm,
And another example, bit related to it, is a person who came to Holy to Sacred Mass a while ago here in our A.S.A community, and the lady said, "I still do not understand it, but it has meaning for me." That's what she said.
mm. Yeah, I love
Um,
that.
yeah, no, it
Mm.
is. Yeah,
Well,
sure.
there's
And
all. Sorry,
yeah,
carry on.
no, I just wanted to say that there's such a power in it,
Mm,
because sometimes the meaning itself can be very clear and can actually function as a beacon, so you know where to go.
mm.
Um, but no, not knowing the exact meaning of it, just having a feeling about it can be a very magical experience in itself.
Yes, I think we were thinking along the same lines. I was pondering how in this modern culture where we value things that are like logical and rational and very
Mm.
conscious, often
Yeah,
over this deeper sense of meaning. And so there is something in itself when we're able to value meaning,
yeah,
just like the woman you gave the example, or like, I don't know why, and yet it
mm,
has meaning for me. When I notice that people are starting to say things like that, I think, yes, there is that ripeness of their, their soul is really starting
mm,
to speak to them in a way that they can hear and feel.
yes,
It's just a different way of orientating than many of us have been conditioned to in this modern world. So
yeah,
yeah, that's such a gift in itself. Anyway, that links really
great.
nicely to the last of the sort of three kind of aspects that Jung talked about when it came to synchronicity, which is this sense that this relates to archetypal patterns. It relates to
Mm,
something beyond the individual that is held in the collective, and we're
mm,
recognizing, like, oh, this isn't just this kind of thing that only means something to me. It does mean something to me, as we're just saying, and yet it's
yeah,
calling me into this greater, even divine, um archetype, emanation, role. We may have different words for it, but
yeah,
it shows us something that is
yeah,
archetypal, even if we're not familiar
mm,
with using those words. That's what's
mm.
happening. So I'd love to pick up the thread there.
Yeah. No, wonderful. I mean, to relate it again to what we talked about at the beginning and the last episode is in our individual fate, where we consciously choose where to go. Um, there we already relate to certain archetypal concepts and meaning again, but it relates to us as an individual. So there we know all of a sudden how to steer our vehicle to where we wish to go, kind of a fulfillment and a meaningful life. Um, if all goes well, after a time, you may come to realize with spiritual work that although this has been a beautiful enterprise, life is not all about you as an individual. So first you offer your ego up to become an individual, but then you may come to the challenge that the individual also is willingly, we hope, offering something up of itself to a greater good. That's destiny. And that's where you find a deeper understanding of the archetypal realm or the collective unconscious. And so then all of a sudden it's not my life so much, but it is thy life. It's about thee or the greater good. And and there you find archetypal patterns and you live a certain archetype. So that's where we come back to living a mythological story in itself. Um, Maybe an expression of that collective mind where we see the relation between yourself and the world on whatever scale that you can manage, and then you have a leading story within it.
Mm.
And like I had a person who comes here for Kabbalah teaching, but as a Dutch person, he actually has a very traditional Budo school. He gives Aikido and swordsmanship and all kinds of traditional weapons, and that's his thing from the very start when he was a little boy. And he goes to Japan and he teaches. That's his story, and he
Mm.
wants to share with students, and he wants to write about it and those kind of things. Um, so for me, that's a direct expression of the collective mind because it's in relation to the other. It's not just only
Mm.
for you. I hope that makes sense.
Yes,
That explanation.
absolutely. There was so many thoughts that were coming in there. One of them was this, and you and I have spoken a lot about this actually over time. The way that when we aren't aware of these greater archetypal patterns, we can think they are literal and very personal to us.
Hmm.
Um, and so we've talked before about experiences of, say, for example, someone who has done a ceremony with, say, a teacher plant and experienced themselves as Mary Magdalene, and
Hmm.
instead of recognizing it as synchronicity and that kind of call of an archetype, which
Hmm.
clearly has meaning for them, they see it as a kind of like, oh, I'm clearly the reincarnation of Mary Magdalene. And
Hmm. Yeah.
I think this is a really helpful thing to recognize, that
Hmm.
the more we can recognize what's actually happening and hold this greater metaphysical frame, the more
Hmm.
that we're better placed to actually live into it in a way that firstly serves us,
Yeah.
but ultimately does serve the whole, because they go
Yes.
together. So I'd love to hear your sense of that.
Yeah. No, that's a very good point because uh, another important thing within Kabbalah is that whatever happens within the psyche on those levels of individual fate and destiny, meaning eventually whatever plays out within the deeper psyche, it has to be tested. So, and the ground or the workshop that we live in, that's daily life. So, can we make that story real or not? Does
Mm,
it really have a tangible significance within our daily life? Or is it just a fantasy?
mm,
Is it just a dream that cannot be, manifest in whatever way? So that's always the testing ground for the Kabbalist to see if my story, yeah, is is something authentic, also in a way that I can materialize it.
mm.
Yeah, that's an important thing there. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
there's can I
yeah.
just add something there? I was just pondering how,
Mm,
um looked at from a shamanic perspective too, it's it's not dismissing the role of magic, the divine, things happening that are beyond our kind of material understanding. But it kind of counts for nothing if it doesn't have a material expression, if we can't bring it into this physical realm. I mean, just giving the example of working shamanically with someone, say, for example, in a shamanic healing, wonderful, shamanic fireworks going off, like all sorts of visions and wonderful things are illuminated. But unless there is something that allows for a change to happen in their lives, it counts for nothing, which is also the same. And, most of our historical working with teacher plants, given that was the example I gave, were in a shamanic setting. They weren't, the reason that shamans worked with teacher plants wasn't so that they could have these just fantastical experiences and go, well, I must be, the second coming because that's what I've just been shown. The idea was this was vital information that could be used in a very material sense for the survival of the person or for the community. It had a very rational, literal reason this was being shown. And again, it doesn't count for anything unless it can be made material. And so I think there's something wonderful about this, linking it back to the conversation in hand around synchronicity. Although it has this wondrous, magical quality, there is something wonderfully practical about understanding the true role of synchronicity is to be able to change how we're living our lives, to make our lives more authentic, more soulful, more true for us.
Yes. Well, yeah. And for a person on the path, shamanic, Kabbalistic, whatever it is, you are trying to look for the different connections without being superstitious about it or wish fulfilling, connecting all kinds of things together, but always testing it indeed. And also, look at it from a common sense perspective. That's also what we need in spiritual work, to my opinion. But indeed, synchronicity is seeing the different things that befall us or are being given to us, so that we understand the apparently unconnected things, and we see new patterns unfolding within our life. And but always that testing. I had just remembered, this is really years ago. You may say it's more prophetic maybe than synchronistic. I was in the southwest of England. I was in Penzance with a friend of mine. He said, we have to go, you need to see St. Michael's Mount. And I said, oh, I would love to see it. So we went there, and we were waiting for the boat. So we were sitting on the beach there looking at the castle, because you couldn't walk there at the moment. And I sit in meditation, and I saw out of the water, strangely enough, in meditation, I saw soldiers coming out of the water walking. So I said, that's strange. And so I told my friend about it. And he said, right, interesting, he said, in a way that I thought he knows more about this that I don't know. Anyway, so we went into beautiful St. Michael's Mount, and a part of it, you go through corridors or hallways, and there are a lot of paintings on either side of the wall. And on one of them, there was this painting of, I think it was like Spanish conquistadores who came actually to Cornwall. It was a historical event that happened once, apparently. And I thought, my God, that's what I saw. And the only thing he said, he could laugh about it because he had seen that picture before. Yeah. So you can ask. I could ask, of course, myself, what is the meaning of this? That I saw that. But it seems to be synchronistic. What is the causality behind it? I don't know. but it has at least a link to historical time.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow I picked it up within the psychological echo, so to
Mm.
speak, or the resonance that is still there.
Yeah, I love that example. And it brings us nicely to kind of almost full circle to where we began talking about the call back to myth and to fairy tale.
Mm,
And it's through that understanding, and I don't mean theoretical, I don't mean intellectual understanding, but that kind of lived, experiential, embodied understanding of myth and fairy tale,
mm,
that we can start to allow synchronicity to be that guide for us.
yeah,
Just use an example you gave, I'm not saying this is how
mm,
you used it, but because of your understanding of myth, of archetypes, that is something you could have used as a portal to understand, like, okay, so this links
mm,
to, for example, you could be working with a particular Arthurian legend that you're recognizing, archetypally, this connects this for me in a way that shows me
yeah,
what's next. And I am not saying there is no other way to understand and
mm,
work with synchronicity, but I would say it's a lot harder to do that without starting to allow myth to live through us, to kind of bring our
mm,
psyches back alive and awake to life. So it doesn't seem to me that these are things that for most of us can be disconnected. Like, myth lies at the heart of so much of us being able to live as who we came here to live.
mm. Yeah, and myth, of course, is they contain the whole wisdom of the human being, and different myths and stories and fairy tales. They highlight just certain aspects, but it's the beauty as well of the tree of life that you can put the whole of all those stories on the tree, and you see the completeness of
Mm,
every story within it, and the richness of the archetypes, the so-called synchronicity, or the strange patterns that are going on there that just fall or come together all the time.
mm,
And yeah, it's a great gift for us and a great good if we understand really what it tells us.
mm,
Uh, I had a conversation actually yesterday with my children, and they said, we don't like it that in these days that some people try, like Walt Disney, they said, they try to reform certain of the archetypes within stories, like the princess has to become the warrior,
mm,
for example. I said, well, you have a point there, because the princess within every person is the soul that needs to wake up.
mm,
Like Cinderella in the kitchen, she needs to wake up eventually to, grow up, to outgrow her stepmother, the ego, and the sisters on either side, and grow into that individual fate. Those kind of references are just beautiful spiritual guidelines
mm.
along the way. Mm. Yeah.
Yes, there's been a real kind of almost like this sense of the myths are literal, and we need to kind of like make them work according to our kind of modern ideals of roles and all of these
Mm.
things, but
Yeah.
miss that they're showing us something that lays so far beyond that, that we can't
Mm.
really have myths and fairy tales conform to our ideals when actually they're trying to wake us up to something beyond that. So coming back to synchronicity before we close, um, what would you invite listeners to perhaps do, open to, when it comes to creating a deeper relationship to synchronicity and how that's playing out in their life? What would you suggest for someone listening that feels like, there's something in what I've heard here that shows me something else is possible when it comes to synchronicity?
The first thing I would say is that synchronicity becomes of meaning when one is on a spiritual quest.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's just coincidence, and you
Mm.
don't pay attention to it.
Yes.
So I would say be very vigilant in life, and and first of all, of course, just pay attention to who you are and where you are, because you're the center of where all the circumstances, of course, would should revolve around. It's
Mm-hmm.
not an egoic thing, but you're the center of your own spiritual life. That's what I want to say. Um, and from that point of view, just see and be very vigilant again and awake to the circumstances that unfold, and why they come to you, and how they or what they contain, what meaning they have. Um, but to be wakeful and vigilant to these things, that is something that we need to be first of all, because we are not most of the
Mm.
time. We are asleep to the messages that synchronicity brings. So I would say maybe a very rudimentary thing to mention, but that's what I would recommend.
Mm. No, I think there's something. It's simple, but it really is where it starts. It calls to mind Mary Oliver's poem "Summer's Day," and there's a line in it that always I can really feel it at such an emotional level. And it's like, I do know how to pay attention. And I think that's something that so many of us are needing to
Mm,
relearn how to pay attention. Um,
yeah.
I was also thinking back to something you said earlier in this episode where you were saying not to be superstitious about it. And I think that's something,
Mm,
again, there's a way that we can relate to life,
mm,
particularly in this modern culture, where again we're kind of looking at everything from a quite a mundane lens and writing off any possibility there could be more. So there is like the
mm,
opposite of superstition, whatever way we might call, like over rationality. On the other
yeah.
hand, there is this kind of like everything has meaning, and I've seen angel numbers, therefore I can't now go out today or whatever, where we're
Yeah.
just taking everything to this very superstitious,
Mm,
literal level. But
yeah.
there is something beyond that where there is a recognition, yes, these things can have deep meaning,
Mm,
but it's not necessarily about kind of like jumping straight into, I understand exactly what this is and therefore I need to do X, Y, and Z. There is a kind
no.
of um allowing that synchronicity to sort of do its magic on us, to show us something. There's a kind of bit like, it
Mm,
reminds me actually of I was talking to my daughter about dream recall earlier this
mm.
week. I often think you and I probably have quite similar conversations with our children about all kinds of weird, wonderful things.
It
Um,
seems to be
yeah,
very
and
synchronistic.
we were talking about dream recall and working with dreams. And she said she normally has a really active dream life, and she's just going through a period where she said, I don't seem like I'm dreaming as much. And I said, well, you probably are. You're just not recalling them in as well as you
Mm,
used to. And she said, well, how can I start? I was giving her different guidance around dream recall. One of the things I said is, when you first wake up and you just pause and allow just to see if there is just like a little thread of the dream that's kind of there ready to pull on. And then
mm,
if there is, just pull on it gently. Just allow it to unravel and reveal more and more of itself. You don't need to
mm.
kind of go in and go, okay, that's it, I know what it is. Just gently
Yeah.
invite more of it. And
Mm,
as that came to mind, I was like, that's, I think, a way that we can work with synchronicity, and this kind of allow it to like invite us deeper into what it's showing us. Um,
yes.
and I think that's something, again, that we have the opportunity to reclaim. That's really, I'd say, a human birthright.
Mm, amen to that.
Mm. Well, I've really enjoyed this,
Yeah.
Mike.
Same
um,
here.
I love where we've gone.
Yeah.
And for listeners that were hearing something in the kind of work you do and what you share, you know, your roundtable work, the Kabbalah, we haven't really touched much on the A.S.A, but I know that, you know, you've got so many different ways that you work with people. Where can they find out more about you and what you do?
All right, there we go. First of all, two websites. The first is circleofavalon.nl, which is Netherlands, but it's in English. So there you can find about my three ways of teaching spirituality: Kabbalah, Roundtable, and A.S.A. And then I have another website that's purely about Kabbalah called KabbalahMysticalSchool.com. You can find me under my name, Mike Bais, or Circle of Avalon on Facebook. I post quite a lot about also my courses and workshops online and also in person. Next March, from the 15th, I will be in the UK to do some roundtable teaching and Kabbalah and do a Holy Mass in Glastonbury. And check out my books if you like. They're all about Kabbalah. So you can find them on my websites or on my Facebook account.
Wonderful. And I, of course, highly recommend listeners do find out more about what you do. And I'm sure there'll be something that calls to them. Well, thank you so much, Mike. Deeply appreciate you and everything you do.
My pleasure. And thank you so much. It's always great to do these sessions.
I very much hope you enjoyed watching that. And if you did and you're not already subscribed, then do hit that bell thingy and subscribe to automatically get each fresh new episode as it's released each week. If you'd like to find out more about the work we do at Be Mythical to guide and support old souls in this new world to live their own unique myth, do hop along to bemythical.com and you'll find out all the ways you can join us and go deeper with us on your own mythical journey. Lots of love for now. Mwah. See you again next week.